What a 2 weeks it's been. Has it been 2 weeks? How
I
long
don't
has it
know. 2 weeks, 2 months. I don't know. It's been a little over 2 weeks because it would have been 2 weeks on Thursday and today is Saturday.
been? Okay.
Oh my gosh, how much stuff can you fit in that kind of a time frame? And it's not even just the actual like locations that we went to or the events that we've experienced. It's such an immense amount of reflection and growth that I feel like has also taken place simultaneously. It's like exhausting to even try to think about all of it at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, the last time we recorded a podcast, we were at our friend's cabin. And it was day 0. It was day 1 or whatever, right? Like we had just left our house. We're now at my cousin's house in LA. So we've made it from Central Washington to Southern California. I'm sure we'll cover what we've done so far in a minute, but that just gives you, as far as right here in this moment, where we're sitting.
Physically where we're at.
Yeah, physically where are we, and yeah, we're 2 weeks down the road. So
Man,
what
that's
happened?
wild.
What happened after we?
So we left our friend's cabin at Mount Rainier and we headed down to Portland to see another one of our friends for an evening, which was just kind of a nice way of transitioning into the trip. It was still super rainy and cold. What were they calling it? The river,
I don't know.
the atmospheric river.
Okay.
That was happening, and it was happening.
And then the bomb vortex.
Bombs and cyclones and rivers, all of it was happening all over the West Coast. So we ultimately choose like the worst time to go, is how that boils down.
Or the best time.
We're really good at timing.
Yeah.
So anyway, we were able to ease into our trip, going from the cabin to our friend's house that's in Portland. He prepared us a fantastic meal.
Gochujang.
Gochujang. It's
Gochujang
really cool.
is this Asian fermented peppers or something. Or,
I don't even know what it's fermenting.
I think it's
know
pepper.
It's fermented.
I think it's peppers. I think it's fermented pepper. But it's really good.
It's fantastic.
Makes
Can
good
be found in
barbecue
Asian
chicken.
markets and just really good for marinating. That's the word I was going for. So we were there for a short time, and then we had found a very unique Airbnb stay, and that is part of what we can kind of do along the road is do kind of a trade on...
Trade share.
Trade share, but it's not really like a trade.
It is. It's a trade share.
So we do like a trade share where
we'll offer to take photos.
Yeah.
Or videos of Airbnbs. Most Airbnb listings have horrible photos. So it's a very equal trade. We get a night or two stay at a place, and in return, we will take photos or maybe video while we're there and hand them off. Mm-hmm. And typically, I find that we've usually done that when it's been off season for these places, typically. Yeah,
because I mean, it's really just a matter for them. They're not going to be renting out the property for that night, so it's beneficial for them to be able to at least get some good photography out of the deal on a night that they otherwise weren't going to be making anything anyway. So
yeah, so it was these covered wagons.
Incredible.
It was like
literally
like a Old West wagon.
It's bigger in scale, though. Let's be real.
It definitely is. And when you showed me the pictures, which is why I think our pictures will help them, because when you showed me the pictures, I was thinking it was going to be tiny. I mean, I was like, whatever, it's dry and we don't have to get out of the truck and set it up in the rain. So it's better than what the alternative was for the time. But honestly, they were super nice. King size bed.
Yeah, there's king size bed, there's a bunk, and then there is actually a bench that you can put cushions on. So technically, you can sleep 6 people in there. Realistically, very comfortably, it fit our family of 4. It was fantastic. Super close to a little town called Jacksonville. That's just very like Hallmark, if I had to like label it in a certain way. Has a really good churro place if you like churros. It's fantastic.
Yeah. So we had a couple nights stay, right? Yeah,
Yep.
we stayed 2
We stayed there
nights.
for 2 nights.
We stayed 2 nights at the wagons, and then leaving the wagons, we went to
Stottyford.
Stoddy Ford. It's 2 words, right?
No, it's 1 word.
Oh, I thought it was 2 words.
No, it looks like a compound word if stoddy was a word.
Okay.
Is stoddy a word?
I don't know.
Okay.
We're probably not pronouncing it correctly or whatever, but
That's what it looks like.
it's a town in Northern California in the, I'm assuming in the Mendocino Valley.
Yeah, because
Because
it's
it said Mendocino County.
And it's a part of the Mendocino Forest?
National Forest.
National Forest?
Yeah. Either way.
Oh my gosh, we should really have our details.
We stayed.
We found a trail system on Onyx, and it was something that appeared to be rated for what our vehicle is capable of. So we knew that we just needed to make it to the beginning of this trail, that there were plenty of spots that we'd be able to camp, because that was a bit of a stretch. We're going from Grants Pass, Oregon, where these wagons were, to go all the way down into California. We passed by Shasta, by the way. Now, Shasta is not always something that likes to show herself, but in all of her fresh snow glory, she was right there. It was gorgeous.
It's pretty.
Yeah.
So we got to the mouth of this trail system and just found a camp spot. It was actually a nice spot.
It was. It was a fantastic spot.
On
It's just like
kind of up on a vista.
Yeah. Yeah.
The
boys were able to pull together a fire.
Yep, you and the boys.
Yeah.
Definitely a beautiful area, and not at all what I think of when I think of California.
No.
It's
still very much so like Oregon.
Yeah. It's definitely different than what I think of when I think of California. Even when I think of like Redding, which is kind of in the same area. But this is like hilly and sage country, and then it has all this, not sage, it's like, I don't know what the brush is, but it's like chest height
Well, it smelled
bushes.
like rosemary.
I don't know. It was a very unique area. Nice though. It was a nice day. And then, like Amanda said, I found the trail on Onyx, and it's classified as like stock ride height. Should be fine.
Should.
Right? So we took off the next morning. We took off down the trail. It turns out it's a very active like motorcycle area, side-by-side area.
Like dirt bikes, motorcycle, dirt bike.
Dirt bikes, yes. Dirt bike and side-by-sides. The trail is really beautiful. The first, say, 15 miles of it are really nice. Really nice, really beautiful. You just wind up this ridge line, and eventually we got up to like 6,200 feet, like really high, almost to snow line. We
could like see it on the next ridge over. We could see the snow line.
And then
it went downhill.
Yeah, and well, it literally went downhill. The trail, you go up over this giant 6,000 plus foot peak. You come down the backside, and then eventually you get to a spot where it's this cliffed out, high exposure, harsh hairpin turns with deep ruts. I mean, ruts is 3 feet deep. They were as deep as our tire.
I know. I keep referring to them as trenches. Like,
Yeah,
they were enough that like the boys could go and hide in if they wanted to.
They were very deep, deep enough to consume the whole tire from the patrol. I will admit that for the first 15 or 20 miles, I was having fun. And then after that, after it got like to where we were pushing the truck as far as it could possibly go, it got less fun. And toward the end of the day, I got to where I was like, I just don't want to be doing this anymore. Because it's not, I like to have fun, and I know that pushing limits is part of how I like to have fun. I like to push myself to do things that either are not necessarily super safe or aren't type A fun, right? I like type B fun is stuff that's painful in the moment, but when you're done, you're like, wow, that was crazy, and it was fun.
It's not like you're an adrenaline junkie, but you definitely don't like to just play it safe.
Exactly. So but this reached a point where I was like, it could go really bad. It's possible. Yeah. It's possible for things to go really bad, and not only could it go really bad, and just our trip could be over, which would suck to have it be over so quickly, but it also could go bad, and like we could legitimately get hurt, and I have everybody that I love in the world inside of the car. So
well, and we were a long ways away from any kind
help.
Of help. Yeah.
So it was not pleasurable.
I remember thinking in the moment, because there are like the tense moments on the trails and stuff where I think, like, for me, I just know not to talk, not to ask you questions, not to even like interrupt, because I know that you're just like focused, and I know it's high stress. And then even the boys have kind of come to figure out those moments too. They're not always perfect, so they still will absolutely like put their foot in their mouth at times, and I have to like turn around and like give them the like mom stare or the mom whisper. But I think everybody kind of like kept quiet, but you still like had a good attitude and were like joking, which was not normal for that tense of a situation. That I was like, okay, maybe it's not like as sketchy as it's appearing to be.
Yeah.
It was.
It was keeping in mind what vehicle we're in, it was probably some of the sketchiest off-roading I've ever done. As far as like high stakes.
And we're saying that because of the vehicle
totally
not having power steering, for it having zero flex. There's just the factory suspension that's on it. Yeah,
we're stock ride height, which, to be fair, was kind of a blessing because we spent so much time like off camber throughout the day. I think that if we had been lifted, it would have just made it worse because we could have been even higher center of gravity than we were. It may have been helpful that we were so low, honestly. I don't know. It reached a point where I was not having fun. That's for sure. I can say that. It reached a point where I was like, I don't want to be doing this anymore. I'm not having fun, and I love driving off-road. I just didn't love that in that moment, and it had been such a long day.
Yeah, and we had kind of established that we only wanted to have like 3, maybe 4 hours of driving every day.
Yeah.
And it was very apparent by how slow we were going on the trail that we were in for a really long day, and the problem was this trail does not have a lot of camping spots on it. Like, you reach a certain point where there's not really anywhere to pull off. And so now you're like, well, how far back would we have to go if we can turn around, which that was not always an option, or how long is it going to take to be able to work through the rest of this, and what the heck else is there on the trail?
Yeah.
Which we then found out.
It was it was just it was a rough trail. It was rough on us. It was rough on the equipment. It was rough on, like, you could tell that it was just a rough trail altogether. I realized afterwards, because I spoke to a buddy about the trail, and he referenced that Northern California got like monsoon level rains,
Yeah, like unseasonable.
like in the last 6 months.
Yeah.
So it's possible that the trail is not normally that bad, and then it got an immense amount of rain, and that rain dug essentially rivers in the road.
Yeah. It's possible. We don't know. It's the first time that we've ever been on the trail, and that's kind of one of those gambles whenever you're leaving the area that you're used to off-roading in. You know, you're taking the word of either fellow travelers who have done that trail before, or in our case, we were looking at an app at Onyx and seeing what it had been rated for. So you don't know if there are any kind of like gates that are going to be there that are going to be unexpected. You don't know about trail conditions due to weather issues or some of the other obstacles that we came across on the trail as well.
Yeah, so we got like halfway. We were pretty much equidistance, and we had gotten off of this harsh hillside that had some very sketchy, off-camber, hard hairpin turns
Switchbacks,
with switchbacks with deep ruts in them. It was like awful. We got down off of that, and I was like, okay, we are not going back up that. So we're going forward from here. Like, we're gonna keep going. And I saw a trail that showed that it cut off of the trail that we were on and looked like it headed back towards civilization. So I said, hey, why don't we try to see if we can just take this road out? Maybe we can just tap out and hit the eject button on this trail. Well,
That was wishful
that
thinking.
was the first trail that we got trees down on. So we had
and river crossing.
We had a couple of trees that we had to get off of the trail, and had some water crossings to do.
Yeah, this is definitely like old burn. I don't know how many years ago it was, but this like old burn that you just have these dead trees that are all around. So when you think about it, all of this heavy rain plus all of these dead trees that are like probably a few years.
Mm-hmm.
And the combination of just like super wet soil, you now have these logs that are just super saturated with water, down trees, left and right.
Yeah, and I didn't bring an axe because
Who needs that in Baja?
we're going to the desert.
Yeah.
There's no trees in Baja, right? That was my thinking, was a hatchet will be fine. It'll do in a pinch. It's also a hammer, and it is good enough to split firewood. And so some of it, I was cutting smaller pieces, and then anything bigger, we would just drag with the bumper of the truck, because we don't have a winch.
No, we just have our speed strap.
Yeah, we just have our bumper. So we were just dragging stuff out of the way, and it worked fine. No big deal. We got down the trail that we were going to try and offshoot off of, and there's like half the road is washed out, and somebody had built with like logs and ratchet straps.
The jankiest thing.
Well, it looks like, honestly, it looks like a bridge.
No.
It looks like the bridges that the Australians build on their trails. I mean,
they're crazy.
The Australians are crazy. Just listen to them talk.
That was sketchy.
It was definitely sketchy.
I didn't want to walk across it. That is how sketchy it was. Like, I didn't even want to walk across it, let alone put a heavy machine on it.
Yeah. Well, somebody did it at some point, but I suspect it was even eroded further
Yeah, because
since it had been built.
somebody definitely
Because
had driven over because
I,
it had like sunk down and had like,
but I was able to kick away the edges, like by where the
oh
logs
yeah,
were sitting. I was able to kick away the edge. So
no.
by that point, I was already checked out. Like we saw the washout, and I was just
No, we
I
literally
was
just
a
said, like, you have two options. You're gambling this. It's either going to be we can make it across, which, if I'm honest, there's not a 50-50 chance on that one, not even close. Or the other route out was that we were going to roll the truck down into this, because it like went down to a creek. Like it was
yeah, it was
probably
like a
down
ravine.
30 feet.
Yeah.
We were either going to make it over this janky bridge or the trip was over. We were
Well,
going to
and
be done.
the sad reality of situations like that are we don't know what's on the other side of that. We could make it, and then there's a locked gate.
Yeah, and you have to go
And then
back
next thing
over
you know,
it.
you have to go back over it, right? So
Yeah.
it's you have to take all these factors into regard when you're like trying to make a decision. I think realistically, we could have made it over.
I
I
don't.
I personally do. I think that we probably would have, but the problem is there's always that chance, right? There's always that, like, the probability is never 100%. So it's if there's even that little bit, that bit is the part where it's like we roll the truck and we can't keep
Yeah.
going.
There's not much that I will like step up and like put my foot down on, but that was absolutely going to be one of those moments where I was going to insist that like I know the sun is going down, it is getting cold, we have nowhere to camp. We know for like the past 7 miles that we had been on that there was nowhere where we could camp. I understood all of those things, but looking at that bridge, not a chance. It was not a risk that I would have been willing to take. And that is something that I know that you and I, if one of us decides, like very matter of fact, it doesn't happen that often, and it's something that would be respected.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and yeah,
It didn't come to that.
I would not have.
Ultimately, we both decided that the odds were not in our favor with going
I would
forward.
not have chosen to drive over it. I was merely saying, in retrospect, looking at it from now, I do believe we could have made it, but I
very
wouldn't.
optimistic.
I wouldn't have wanted to gamble it.
Yeah.
But I mean, just psychologically, I was checked out
We
at
were
this point. I was
tired. We were
done. I
tired.
was tired. I wanted to just camp. I wanted to set up camp, eat some food,
Yeah.
and be done for the day. I was very like mentally tired because I will say, driving off road with the Patrol as compared to driving off road with the Gladiator, vastly different. The Gladiator is so forgiving. You can drive it with one finger. You can just like move the steering wheel around, no effort. 37-inch tires, just drive over anything, doesn't care. The Patrol is like this visceral experience. You're everything. There's no power steering, so every turn is like, it's the first time driving a car I got arm pump like I was riding a dirt bike.
I
got the
watched as the
same-
steering wheel tried to rip out of his hands multiple times.
Oh yeah,
Where it
Well,
like
and it-
start to kind of go and you'd like tense up
yeah.
to catch it, and I would.
Well, and sometimes I couldn't.
Yeah.
Sometimes it would just rip
go.
the wheel right out of my hand,
Yeah.
and I just have to slow down, grab the wheel again, and reposition. But yeah, it's this all. Plus, it's manual. The Gladiator is automatic, right? So you have one less thing to do. You don't have any clutch or transmission to deal with on the Gladiator. It was challenging. It was more challenging than driving the Gladiator, and it was more physically and mentally taxing than driving the Gladiator because it's a very, like I say, it's visceral. You have to you have to do things.
I didn't ever, like, I wasn't in that moment when we were at this janky bridge and the sun is going down, it's getting colder. I know that we're all tired, which means that he's like way more tired because he's had to physically like battle the truck to get it to where we're at, plus maneuvering the trees that were down. But I just remember feeling like this is our first trail that we're taking on this trip. And we've already, like, it feels like we've already bitten off more than we can chew. It was one of those, like, what are we doing kind of moments.
Yeah.
Not feeling like we need to reassess our lives and all of that. But I just remember thinking just like, what is happening?
Yeah. There's times during backpack trips that I've been on where I just want to be home. At least for a couple of minutes. And then you snap out of it. And you're like, oh no, I forgot. This is why I want to be here, right? That was one of those times.
Yeah.
For me at the washout. Because I knew we had to turn around and retrace our steps fairly far over some sketchy stuff. Because there was some sketchy stuff.
Oh, yeah. Just backing, just turning around at that one spot.
Was super sketchy because there was barely any room.
Yeah. We got to Austin Powers our way through that one.
Which, with no power steering, is a total pain in the butt. So I just wasn't, I was like, okay, I want to not be here right now. But the beauty of adversity is you don't get to not be there. Mm-hmm. You have to just deal with the cards you were dealt. And we could have risked it and just gone over the thing, or we could turn around, and turning around just made more sense. So we turned around and had to backtrack quite a ways and then take on virgin ground trail that we had not seen that day and didn't know. Many more trees. We had to do many more trees, and we had to cover quite a bit of mileage. Like, we ended up doing an additional 15 miles that evening. I mean, it was getting dark by the time we were like turning around.
Yeah,
at the washout.
Just at the washout.
So by the time we made it back
dark.
to the main trail, it was dark.
Yeah. And then
really happy that we had bright lights.
Yeah.
Really happy that we had big
fantastic.
lights, because it would have been way worse if it had been dark and we didn't have good lights.
I remember looking at Onyx as it was dark outside and just seeing how far we had to go. And I was like, we could be driving all through the night. And if we're going to continue to hit tree after tree after tree, this is going to be miserable.
Yeah. Well, and it was. It was fairly miserable.
It was.
We cleared so many trees. At one point, I joked and told Amanda that I'm going to send a bill to California Forestry and ask them to pay me for clearing all of their trees for them, because we ended up clearing, I think, 7 or 8.
Oh, no, it was 9.
Okay, 9. We ended up clearing 9
trees.
There were more trees. That it was just 9 times that we had to stop. There were, because some of them, there were multiple trees that had fallen.
The last one was the big.
So we do all of this mileage, and all the while there's these 3-foot deep ruts that will transition from the right side of the road to the middle of the road to the left side of the road and then back to the right. And so multiple times I'm having to pivot across these ruts when you don't have 3 feet of ground clearance and 37-inch tires. You have to be very careful about how you do that, because if you aren't careful, you can tip the truck over, even just on a 3-foot deep rut. So, especially when you don't have much articulation, which the Patrol does not. So it resulted in hanging a front wheel in the air many times.
A lot.
Having to pivot 3-wheel and then landing a tire back down as the car like pivots on 2 tires. Not the most comfortable feeling in the world, but I I was okay with it. I was just convinced that I was scaring the whole car
No,
while it was
luckily the
happening.
boys like didn't care in the least bit. So luckily they've gone through so much off-roading with us that I mean they fully trust us. They don't get uncomfortable. They know that we're always going to ask them to get out of the vehicle if it's something that's sketchy, because we'll never put their lives at risk. So
Yeah.
they completely trust us, and they know as well that we're not going to put them through like super long days if we don't have to. So for us being in that situation, plus they got to help out with removing some of the trees and stuff.
Yeah.
Like we include them in everything. So they were able to be a part of everything. They got to help and feel like they were contributing. Plus, they were very well aware of how much work and effort needed to go into every single tree that we were moving.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, we weren't freaked out, but
The last two tree obstructions, just before them, there were these like larger pull-offs, I guess you could call them, like on the road. They were like either on a switchback or in an area where there was like enough room that we could have camped on the side of the road. And both
but
times.
it was still private land.
No, this was
right?
on public. No, this was on public. And both times I thought to myself, you shouldn't get greedy. You should just pull off and just camp here and just call it good. But in the back of my mind, I was like, I don't want to have put all of this work in today to just sleep on the side of the road. Like I wanted to find a campsite. And both times I passed on the opportunity, and then immediately, like after the next corner, another tree in the road. And I was like, dang it. Just keep getting greedy and keep running into trees. But the last one was the culmination of like the whole day, which is just this wild, it was like, yeah.
Well, so we started to see side-by-side tracks. So honestly, like there was a glimmer of hope. Like
Yeah,
we
were seeing
figured we
tracks.
saw this, so that's a good sign. If we're seeing tracks going the other direction, then that means that they were able to get through the road, which in theory should mean that we're not going to deal with any more like massive obstructions in the trail. So I think that we're just kind of hanging on to that hope. But one 90-degree turn and a few trees.
180-degree turn. It was, it was a total hairpin. One of the hairpins with deep rut in it and super off camber. And when you're climbing that stuff, even though we're super low geared, momentum is very important. You have to maintain momentum moving. It's not about traction or keeping the vehicle moving. It's about not allowing the vehicle to have time to get topsy, right? Like you want to kind of just skip over these ruts as much as possible when it's an option. And so I was doing that. I was moving at a pretty good clip. Pull around this harsh 90-degree turn. There's a super
Massive
deep
rut. One of the deepest ruts that we had hit on the trail all
and,
day.
And we got over it, and then we get up and just barely make it over a small rise just past the turn, probably by about 40 or 50 yards. And immediately there's like 3 trees in the road, all wadded up together. And so I stopped. And I don't even like to do this because I don't trust park brakes, but I had to set the park brake and get out of the car and assess what's going on. And there's like one very large tree coming from the left side of the road onto it, covering till about 3/4 of the road surface. There's another equally large tree that is parallel to the road,
Just like
right at the edge of the larger one. And then a bunch of other smaller trees.
Well, and then there was a third one that was coming, so it was almost like a triangle.
Yeah.
And then this, I could have cried. It was pitch black at this point. It was freezing cold. I knew there was no way for us to safely back down the trail based on what we had just gone through just to get around that turn. And there was no room for us to really even strap these logs to then try and back them up. We didn't have the space to back up. It just wasn't an option. And I just remember feeling just sick to my stomach, thinking, like, we don't have a choice. We have to come up with a solution. And I mean, I know that I'm not super strong. I know that, like, I have a lot of limitations when it comes to being able to be of much use when it comes to recovery stuff. And so I was just concerned of where we were. I had no idea what the heck the plan could be. We couldn't go back, and at that point we couldn't go forward.
Yeah.
And we're on this like steep angle.
Yeah, it's tough when that's the problem with like all in just committing to the trail is like, it is best at times you do want to just power out. You can solve a lot of problems off-road with more throttle. That is true, but it's tough because when you run into an obstruction like this, like Amanda said, we couldn't really back up. And if I had walked that, I would have seen the obstruction, and we probably could have done something in advance and then just blown right past it. But after a whole day of like checking stuff
again,
out,
it's pitch black.
Exactly. So it's tough. Like there's stuff you can do that I didn't do that partially led to it, right? But we just did what we could. We did what we had to do.
We did. We didn't discuss that it was looking grim. We just went out, started to problem solve, started to physically move the logs out of the way.
I got the truck as close as possible. I pretty much ran the bumper into the largest log that was covering about 3/4 of the road, put a strap around it and around the bumper, and just essentially strapped the log directly to the bumper. I mean, there was no clearance at all. And then navigated, I was able to back.
You were able to go like 5 feet?
Maybe, tops.
Yeah, that was it.
And it but it was just enough to move the log to the point where then when I unstrapped it, I was able to just kind of scoot the end of it, just far enough over, and then we were able to move the other two just kind of up and out of the way, and then the one long one that was coming down the third leg of the triangle.
And I mean, we're talking about like physically picking up and pushing off to the side.
Yeah, we could only move the one big one with the truck, and then the rest of it we just had to do just manually, just moving
Power through it.
And then, of course, the line that we had because I still had to pull around the large log and then back to the left side of the trail to go around this large log that's on the right now. The problem was, as I was coming out, the line was going to dump me directly into the rut.
Yeah.
This deep,
massive rut.
like 3-foot rut. And normally I would just straddle that and go down the trail and be fine. But I kept trying to realign the truck, but I had these defined walls that I could not change my line. Mm-hmm. So we grabbed a couple of trees and just shoved them into the rut to give just enough runway. And luckily, honestly, it could have not worked. I'm glad that it did.
It did.
But I was able to pull onto the trees in the rut, stay high, and then pull back off of and straddle the rut on the other side of the big tree obstruction.
Yeah.
And then
he just kept going. I was just running behind the truck, and I was just go until you can stop.
Because we're still on a hill. I mean, everything we just discussed is all taking place on a very steep hill. So once I had momentum and was moving, I definitely was not going to stop. Yeah. Regardless of if you would have said, hey, what are you doing? Why aren't you stopping? I would have been I'll see you at the top of the hill.
Yeah.
But luckily we made it through that one, and like shortly after, like maybe 5 minutes on the trail after, we pull up to this beautiful campsite.
Yeah.
We see civilization out in front of us.
City lights.
There's
I've
like
never
city
been
lights.
so excited to see city lights. Typically, like, I don't want to see it. I want to just see the stars. I was so happy to just see a town.
Just because we knew that meant that there is probably like a road out, easily accessible. Now at this point,
it just was comforting.
And somebody had left a fire lit.
Yeah, somebody had like a party during the day.
Yeah, there was
on this, like clearing
platters,
and so they had this like some garbage that was in the fire pit, but there was just like one tiny little log.
There was an ember.
Still
and so
burning.
we just were able to, and there was a ton of wood in this area because it was a burn area.
Yeah.
And somebody had even like
some of it
chopped up some wood for us. So we just like threw a bunch of wood on the fire. We're all freezing at this point. I was absolutely head to toe covered in dirt. I had essentially been rolling in dirt for the last 5 hours. Mm-hmm. Even I was cold, which takes a lot. I usually don't get cold very easily.
That tells you how cold I was.
Yeah. So we just threw a ton of wood on the fire, set up the tent, ate a very expedient
snacky snack dinner.
Yeah, we had like Cheez-Its, some beef jerky, and a pop.
Yeah.
Or something, or a fizzy
like
water.
Really easy stuff.
Very quick. Nobody was necessarily. I think we were so like tired and worn out, we just didn't even want to eat.
Yeah. It was cold. Yeah, we were just done. We were toast. Even the boys, and I mean it wasn't like stressful. And I know that I reflected on this around the campfire that night, that there are so many marriages that would have fallen apart with what we had been through. But not once did we like have any kind of temper. Not once did we get in an argument or anything like that, which comes from so many years of experience. Like, we just know how to communicate with each other, and we also just know that having any kind of explosion doesn't actually improve the situation. So regardless of whether there's frustration or there's stress, like, it's not going to matter if you let all of that come out. It is going to degrade your situation further. So
my grandparents were married for 63 years, and when you would ask my grandmother what the key to a long, healthy marriage is, she would say, knowing when to shut the hell up. And I think both of us probably had times that day where we were like, I'm not going to say anything.
It's not. Yeah.
It's not
the time. Yeah.
It's not a good time to mention anything. I'm not going to. And I think that's honestly the key to how we made it through that day.
100%.
Was just knowing that, like, because there are periods of time in the car during that day where we just had to just be quiet. Mm-hmm. Nobody had to talk. And then there were times when we would just commiserate and make light out of the situation.
Mostly
and
like laugh. You just try and find reasons to laugh in a moment, because that's like the best cure for any like form of crazy stress, right? Because like, what else can you do? You're either going to go in the fetal position and start crying, or we can just laugh about how, like, wow, this is happening.
It was a rough day. It was a rough day, but it ended well. And I was fairly certain at this point that the trail was going to be okay to get to, like, the highway system.
Of getting to that camp spot and knowing that people had literally been there, like, within an hour.
Yeah.
And they had gotten in and out, no problem.
Yeah.
So, that all signs would lead to, we're going to have a clear path tomorrow.
So, we just had a field expedient dinner, went to sleep, and closed the page on what was a wild day. And I know in the last podcast we talked about some of our, like, insecurities around this whole lifestyle and this whole trip. And I know I wrote in my journal that night at that camp, I wrote in my journal that I didn't think about any of my insecurities that day. I didn't think about
No.
like, can we do this? Can we afford this? Are we going to be able to do this long term? Am I going to look like a failure to my friends and family?
Yeah.
I didn't think about any of those things
No.
at any point during that day because I was just hyper
Too busy
present.
worrying about not letting the truck roll down the hill.
Well, I was just hyper present. And
Yeah.
I think that day is a good example. And then I think I've realized just this whole lifestyle shift that we've done is just leading to being present, which is this thing that you chase. I remember chasing it, but the problem is when I would go to like a shop and go clock in and work on cars, I'm always thinking about some other thing. I'm never really all the way present. I'm trying.
It's hard.
I'm trying to
So
do it,
hard.
and I try to be more present all the time. But I will say, if you want to be really present, put your whole life in a car and just leave. Because I will say, I have not thought about the outside world much at all, especially that day.
Yeah.
I didn't think about how's my mom's roofing going or how, like, none of the things, the random stuff that comes to your head
Yeah.
where you're like, oh, I should call and check in with that person and see. None of that stuff came up because it's just here and now was all that we had in the world. So it's just, we just have to, these trees are obstructing our way. We need to figure out how to move them. That's it. That's all that exists in the whole universe. Nothing else for that moment. So I don't know. I think it was a good, the positive outlook on it is, like you said, it tested and proved that our relationship and like communication abilities are strong.
Yeah.
To me, it proved how capable the patrol is.
Yeah.
Surprisingly capable for what it is. Like, so much so that I'm not even sure that I want to lift the patrol at this point.
Yeah.
Because I feel like
that's okay.
it did so much stuff that I would have never thought that it would be capable of. Why change it, honestly, at this point? And another positive would be just it was like an exercise in being present. And it was very effective.
I think it also was a huge positive to see how the boys were going to handle that kind of situation in many ways. Our boys are very accustomed to this lifestyle. They've been raised to communicate. Obviously, communication is huge to us. We understand the importance in a marriage, but we also understand that it plays such a vital role in any relationship. And so they have been raised to communicate properly as well. They have a strong desire to participate in the things that we do. And although it does take extra time and effort, it's always worth it to be able to provide the opportunity for them to just be involved in some way. And obviously, when you're talking about recovery stuff, or you're talking about physically moving a tree, that's not exactly something that you want to put a child in the middle of, but that doesn't mean you can't take the extra time, allow them to be a part of strapping something together. And like in this case, like we just told the boys, like, you need to be, 25 feet away, and you need to be at this angle when it comes time to actually move the truck. Like, it slowed the process a little bit, but they were still super excited to just be there and be present with us and to play a part. So I think that it was a huge positive to show their patience, their resilience, their willingness. So I think that they did fantastic. I think that most kids wouldn't have handled a day like that as well.
There were a lot of positives, and it sucked. at the same time.
It sucked.
It sucked. Big time.
I don't think we'll forget that one for a while. I also don't think that we'll go back on that trail
No.
either.
Not a chance.
I think that was like a one-time thing.
I don't think anybody goes on that trail.
I wouldn't recommend it.
I would have.
Unless you're on a side-by-side.
I'm not saying. I don't think anybody goes on the trail. I think we were the only people dumb enough to go on it.
Well, at least
we
for
did all the
them.
tree clearing.
It's true.
So obviously nobody had
Yeah.
driven that trail in at least a while.
Yeah.
Because you don't get 9 tree obstructions
Okay,
on
well-
one trail system. It's at least a
Yeah.
season. Nobody's been. We were the first ones to go down that trail.
And nobody's going to go on it now because now we're getting into the part where it's going to actually start to see snow.
Yeah.
Well,
It'll be too snowy.
Yeah.
So
So there was just
Whatever.
some personal journeys happening that day.
yeah. I think that's a good place to stop this podcast. And I think that we should wrap this one here, and we'll come at you guys with
With the next adventure.
what the next
leg.
And they get much less hair raising after this.
And I
they
think-
just shift. So
yeah, I think that, our perspectives now, we get to start on a much more like spiritual journey after this.
totally.
Better or worse.
So, as always, thanks for listening, guys, or watching if you are. And don't forget to go to our website, check out all of our stuff. You can grab some of our merch if you like, and leave a comment and a like to let us know what you think. Bye.